I'm really worried about the November elections.
Democrats won by 10 points.
I know that, but I don't trust them to not cheat.
That is so deeply ironic. I think that is deeply harmful and problematic when Trump baselessly sows discord and doubt about the elections, but now they're just doing it. Guys, up first, we're going to check in with The View, and I'm still searching for a good name for our segments about The View. The only one I've come up with, but it doesn't really work as a segment name, but I think it's interesting, is The View, ... from hell. Because it really is just the gift that keeps on giving in terms of brain rot, in terms of losing IQ points, and just the worst possible coverage and discourse imaginable. Yet it's aired by the news division of a major news network, and these women are paid millions of dollars for their analysis, and they get to do interviews with like Supreme Court justices and presidents and vice presidents, and it's like, bruh, you really could not think of a better example of people like failing up or like mediocre people just absolutely rising to the top than The View. Yet millions of people, particularly women, tune in every day for their daily dose of Delulu. And you know what? I talk crap about The View, but I also do love them because they keep giving us perfect examples of terrible coverage and ridiculous takes to react to and discuss, which is what we do here. So without further ado, I'm going to play you the first clip where I just feel like I'm being gaslit because they're just doing exactly the thing they say is terrible when Republicans do it, and pushing baseless election conspiracy theories. Listen to this clip from The View this week.
But I have to say, to your point, I'm really worried about the November elections, even though it looks like the Democrats are going to pull it off.
Democrats won by 10 points.
I know that, but I don't trust them to not cheat. I don't. The Republicans.
Oh, the Republicans. Yeah.
I don't trust.
Okay, Trump. Seriously, we've got an old person, an orange person, saying elections are going to be stolen or cheating for no reason ahead of time with just baseless speculation. That is so deeply ironic because they, and I agree with them, think that is deeply harmful and problematic and really anti-American and everything when Trump baselessly sows discord and doubt about the elections, but now they're just doing it for no reason. And what's also funny about that is they spread a lot of panic and misinformation about the SAVE Act, the voter ID and proof of citizenship legislation that Republicans were pushing very hard for. And a lot of progressive commentators, including on The View, suggested like that this law would rig the election for Republicans or anything. That law isn't passing, doesn't look like passing. And yet, they're still doing this. They're just baselessly speculating. To be fair, Trump did put out a couple crazy posts about it, but there's been no actual movement towards anything that could constitute a threat to the validity of the midterm election. And again, it's administered at the state level. So no worries, just panic a few million people and spread fear and alarmism. What's the harm?
Trust the Republicans.
In terms of gerrymandering?
Well, thank God. They're trying it with gerrymandering, and then they'll fool around with everything else. I don't trust that.
But
Elon
thank
Musk.
God that it's still in the hands of the states. And
Also, let's pause here for a second and discuss. I think gerrymandering is a scourge and is a real problem, but blue and red states are both doing it in this kind of race to the bottom. And gerrymandering doesn't mean an election is rigged. Like, it doesn't affect how people can vote and whether they can vote. It affects the districts that are drawn and therefore can skew the balance of who gets elected. But it is unfortunately a bipartisan scourge. And it is not like it's a legal process that state legislatures are allowed to do. So it's not like stealing or rigging elections. That's not gerrymandering. While a problem that we need to find some sort of across the board solution to ban, is not that. And if it was, then so many elections by this logic have been stolen or rigged, both in blue and red states for decades. So give me a break here.
the states, and you'll know where it's happening.
Yeah.
And
Well, I
people
hope
can
so.
yes, because we can't take it out of the hands of the states. It's in the hand. Your voting is in the hands of the states. So I believe in the states. I believe the states who are not afraid are going to let elections happen the way they're supposed to.
What about the ones that don't, like Florida?
And I think the people will gather themselves up as they have been doing and going out and voting for the right direction for their issue, for their city, for their town. I believe in the people. I got faith in us. We'll be right back.
Not Whoopi actually kind of making sense? Y'all, I'm so sorry, but when Whoopi Goldberg has become the voice of reason, we've entered a simulation. That can't be real. That can't be possible. What? Guys, I have a kind of embarrassing confession to make. I only read about 10 books in all of 2025, but I'm determined to dedicate more time and more energy to reading in 2026. Yet after being bombarded all day with email newsletter updates and reading news articles, I find it hard sometimes to sit down and pour through a 500-page nonfiction book, which is why discovering today's sponsor, Shortform, was such a godsend. Shortform produces super high-quality guides to nonfiction books. Their guides are like super-powered book summaries, comprehensive coverage of all the book's key ideas, clearly and simply explained, plus smart commentary and analysis. It's like your smartest friend teaching you about a book, taking minutes instead of hours. For example, I wanted a refresher on one of my favorite political books that I haven't read in a few years, Basic Economics by the economist Thomas Sowell. But the actual book runs over 700 pages, and I don't quite have time to pour over that all again. But using Shortform, I was able to read through all the main ideas and insights from this classic in like 20 minutes. So join me in fighting back against our destroyed attention spans and terrible doom-scrolling habits. Check out Shortform now to focus your mental energy on learning and reading in the new year. Go to my link now, shortform.com/Polumbo, to try it out for free and get $50 off an annual subscription. Also, what's she talking about? Florida isn't running its own election? Yes, it is. And Florida has secure elections. The reason Florida is like a pretty solidly red state. So the reason that Democrats would not win in Florida would just be because it's a red state. And in fact, they might do all right in Florida because the momentum is swinging very strongly towards Democrats. And it's really unfortunate to see this kind of reckless rhetoric for people who have millions of people that tune into them, just no standards or basis for it. And of course, it's true that like Trump posts baseless stuff on his feed and Fox News does this kind of thing as well, but it doesn't make it okay, especially from the people who for years have criticized the right for doing that sometimes, and I agreed with those criticisms. Here they are doing the same thing, same BS, different day, and Joy is so off base that even Whoopi Goldberg is trying to bring her back to that is when you know you're cooked. Seriously? You went too far for Whoopi, who doesn't even seem to know where she is half the time on this show. And she's giving lately, at least, Joe Biden with some of the rants she engages in. And yet she's the voice of reason here. That's remarkable, people. That is absolutely remarkable. Now, I want to show you another clip from The View this week where, you know, when I think of who I want to analyze the economy, to analyze the federal tax code, and to opine on the intricacies of big corporations and their business operations, I always think that the ladies of The View, the leading lights of our time, should really be consulted. In fact, you know, the president has a White House Council of Economic Advisors, and typically esteemed economists are put on that. But instead, you could just bring the roundtable of The View in. What could go wrong? Because they're very knowledgeable about these subjects. Just kidding. Just kidding. Here they are ranting about Jeff Bezos because I think he sponsored the Met Gala or something, which that was a hot mess. I'll probably discuss that in another video at some point. But they start ranting about how he supposedly doesn't pay any money in taxes, which is one of those brain rot fake narratives that progressive politicians and activists and media outlets have just repeated a bunch of times, even though it's like absolutely ridiculously untrue. Anyway, here's that clip.
And aside from the controversy, and I'm like you, I also like my Amazon, and I want him to pay his people.
That's all.
I want him to make the company better because they're slipping. You know, they're slipping. So I want him to pay I want him to pay the company's taxes. That's what I want.
I have no truck with those people who dressed up. I think it's great to have that.
Just have
but
that
somebody
thing.
like him needs to pay. And these billionaires,
Well, that is the
I'm paying and you're
point.
paying and
That's
you
right.
guys
We're
are
all
paying more
paying
than they
taxes,
are. It's not fair.
and that's what we should be fetching about. Make them pay, and that should be an outcry whether he does the Met Ball or not.
Yeah.
That should be a norm. Everybody pays. They say the only thing you can depend on is death and taxes.
Yeah.
How come they don't depend on it? You know? And we'll talk more about fashion when we come back.
I love the crowd like clapping them off for the commercial break as if, yes, queen, preach, dropping knowledge, dropping truth bombs. And it's like just literally ridiculous anti-reality slop. I'm sorry. The idea that the women at that table, which they are multi-millionaires, and at least kudos to them for admitting that. And I'm sure they pay a lot in taxes. The idea that they pay more in taxes than Jeff Bezos, who's worth hundreds of millions of dollars, is so laughably absurd. Jeff Bezos has paid more in a single year of taxes than those women combined will ever make in their entire lives or be worth in their entire lives. Not how much they pay in taxes, than all the money they've ever made in their life. He has paid more than that in taxes in a single year. Like, this really is one of those things that people just repeat over and over again. Jeff Bezos and Amazon don't pay any taxes. My teacher pays a higher tax rate than Jeff Bezos and all this stuff. And they just say it and they'll like find 1 year where Amazon technically, because of like corporate bookkeeping, had a negative income and didn't pay income tax. So they'll just ignore all the other years where they paid billions upon billions of dollars. And they'll say, look, they don't pay taxes. It isn't true. The US tax code is actually pretty progressive, not in the like left-right sense, well, kind of, but in the sense of wealthier people bear much, much larger burden of the tax code than everyone else in America federally. Now, there are too many loopholes and subsidies and carve-outs and exemptions, and that should really all be simplified and done away with because it does create like distortions and create opportunities for people to game the system with tax loopholes and all of that. And I do agree with that. But the idea that all these people just don't pay taxes is just literally not true. I mean, I have this here. According to the Wall Street Journal, Amazon paid $2.8 billion in 2025 in federal income taxes. In 2024 and 2023, it paid more than $7 billion in federal income taxes. Bezos personally in 2024 paid $2.7 billion in taxes, according to Forbes. So it's like they live in this alternate reality. They constantly demonize these wealthy people as if they don't pay their fair share, when in fact they are mostly funding the government. I mean, most of the federal budget is paid for by, in terms of federal income tax at least, is paid for by high earning people and the wealthy. And something like the bottom 40% barely pays any share of the federal income taxes at all. And I'm not necessarily saying that's bad, but I am saying that if that is the way things are, and yet you're still out here demonizing these people as if they're just skating by and paying $0 in taxes, I find this disturbing. One, just because it's like totally irresponsible to just be anti-reality and just push a fake narrative. And two, because some of this like demonization of wealthy people does get into dark territory where you see the people marching with the guillotines and wanting to not just, we can have a debate about whether there should be an extra 1% tax on stock trades or another 2% increase in the marginal income tax. I'm not saying any of that is like beyond the pale or evil or dangerous, but there's like this demonization of some of these affluent, successful people that I do think is dangerous. I mean, that's why you have people murdering and the healthcare CEO and cheering for it, right? Now that one's complicated and gets into the intricacies and many failures and problems with the healthcare system, but there's lots of people out here saying eat the rich, and it bleeds into like violent and dangerous rhetoric, and part of that is rooted in a totally false idea that you have these people making all the money paying zero, like getting away paying $0 in taxes. And oftentimes it's promoted by people like Senator Elizabeth Warren and others who push extremely misleading claims and narratives about this, and then people like the ladies of The View. I don't know, man. I just find it to be extremely disheartening and inaccurate. And it's just so hypocritical too, because I am sure that these women who earn millions of dollars themselves have well-paid accountants and use whatever means legally they can to reduce their tax burden, which is all that Jeff Bezos does, right? So if you are mad at him for not paying enough in taxes, your anger should be with the tax code, not with Jeff Bezos. All he's ever done is you follow the law to the maximum extent to pay as little in taxes as he can. And then he, of course, donates tons of money to all charities and sorts of different things. And he's created these, I don't know, untold thousands of jobs for people and so much economic activity and so many services and goods he's provided for people, like so much convenience and even more than convenience, like helping people get things they need. It's just like the idea. I'm not saying he's beyond reproach or that Amazon's working conditions have always been good enough. All of that is legitimate, but this blanket demonization of these people is so often rooted in falsehoods and misinformation, and it just gets broadcast by these people on these major media platforms all the time. I don't know, man. I just really think that's unacceptable and disappointing.